Hello, everyone.
Hello.
My name, as it was last week, is Ryan Fink, and I'm here on behalf of Ted Smith and the International Hempology 101 Society. Welcome to our weekly Wednesday lecture at the University of Victoria's Cinecenta Theatre. Last week, you'll remember that Mr. McMahon, or Opus, was here from Pot TV just to generally talk about the history of medical cannabis in Canada, as well as his colorful experiences throughout the history of the movement locally here. If you missed that, it should be online very soon. You can watch it on the Hempology YouTube channel. We're here today to hear Mr. Owen Smith, my colleague from the Victoria Cannabis Buyers Club, talk about a brief history of the Victoria Cannabis Buyers Club, as well as going into a bit of greater detail about his recent experiences with the courts surrounding a bakery bust that happened recently. If you're familiar with that, he'll tell you all about it in a minute. But he's asked me to just sort of start the lecture off because I actually worked for the club between 2001 and 2003, so 10 years ago now. So I had a few experiences there that are, I guess, in the history books, so to speak. So I'm just going to give you a little quick run through about what happened to me back then. I won't talk about how it's been working for the club for the past few months since I came back. So to start it off, I was very unhappily employed at Starbucks. And I remember one day it came down to me telling my boss that I absolutely refused to say, double your size for $1.25 every time somebody bought a Frappuccino. I didn't like the idea of sort of mind tweaking every single customer that came through the store. Okay. And that resulted in me being fired. Whereupon I told one of my best friends how happy I was not to be working for Starbucks anymore. And he happened to be working for Ted at the time as the main distributor of the Cannabis Buyers Club. And it turns out that they were in need of a baker. So I went down to the club the very next day, shook Ted's hand, and that was pretty much it. I was up in the bakery right after that making cookies, and that's where my story began. So for the first year of my employment, it was the first year that the club was open in its new store, well, not new now, I guess, but new then, storefront. And things were quite a bit different. The staff was kind of cobbled together from anything that could be found lying about, really, myself included. We were just a mishmash crew. And although everyone's intentions were right, we didn't have the same kind of professional, hard-working staff that we really have the pleasure of working with today. So things were a bit loosey-goosey, but also not nearly as busy, so it kind of worked out. There was a lot more chaos, but the chaos was a result of a lot less people. And yeah, in many ways it was the same as it is now, and in many ways it was different. So for that first year I was baking, and the bakery was in a very small apartment that was previously the home to the club before the club took the storefront. And at that time, Ted was out on bail conditions that forbade him from smoking pot in public. I mean, not that it wasn't already illegal, but the conditions were much stricter on him. If he was found smoking pot, he would have been in violation of his bail, I guess it was, and been thrown in jail until his trial came about, which would have been quite some time. So basically Ted spent all of his time sitting in that apartment, smoking pot and entertaining people, various business meetings, that kind of thing. And honestly, it was great because I was there all the time too. And it was just really, really quiet and lots of good conversation with interesting people who would come up to visit us. Very fond memories of that. But then about a year after that started, one of the raids happened down at the club. It was the first raid I'll tell you quickly about. It happened as a matter of accident. Someone had broken the glass on the front door because there was a big change jar on the desk, the front desk, and they wanted to steal the change. And that set the alarm off and brought the police down to the store. They then had to look around to make sure there was nobody in the building, which there wasn't, but of course they found lots of cannabis, lots of money, which they ended up taking all of. So no one was arrested during that, but we did lose a lot of equity. The next raid happened about 6 months after that, I think it was. And that time the store was actually open for business during the raid. The police did some sneaky fishing around and found somebody with a gram on them that they bought at the club, used that to get a warrant, came into the store, and arrested my colleague at the time. His name was Colby. And one of his release conditions after being arrested was that he wasn't allowed to go back onto the premises of the store. So we traded jobs. He started baking at the apartment, and I started doing what he had been doing down at the store, which was great. Because, you know, baking, I've been doing it for a year. I was ready to try something new. So I went down to the store and worked there for about a year. Again, 2 years total. And wonderful experience. I gotta say, I do prefer it now, even if it is 10 times busier. It's a lot more fun, and the people are great now. But yeah, a year of that, chaos, and then the police came in again. And I was working along with my colleague, Scott, who was actually the guy who had gotten me the job baking in the first place. So I guess I'm sitting there behind the distribution desk, and I've got the full price chart behind me, product list, and I'm handing an eighth of cannabis to a member who had just finished signing up, and the police walk into the distribution room, and that's what they see. They see me in the act, passing a guy an eighth of weed, money's on the table, boards behind me, all the prices, like, it's obvious, right? Everyone in the room knows exactly what's going on. But yeah, that didn't really matter in the end, because the charges were thrown out, because no judge in their right mind wants to put someone in jail for helping sick people obtain their medicine. It's basically what this whole fight has come down to over the years. Is we put up with a bunch of BS from the police, we make our way into the court, things get thrown out, and we keep on doing what we did before. So after that, I did a number of things. I lived on one of the Gulf Islands for a couple of years. Then I went to university. Ended up getting a degree in semiotics from the University of Toronto, and then a graduate degree here at Uvic for English. I was stoned the entire time, and I want to make that absolutely clear to everyone watching this, okay? I was in the top 10% of my class both times, and I was way higher than everyone else, okay? That's how it works.
And you made it this far.
And now, I'm gainfully employed in the cannabis industry, right? So don't let anyone tell you that a master's degree in English won't get you a decent job. So I could go into what it's been like coming back. It's been very interesting seeing the difference between how things were back then and how things are now. But that's just to sort of give you a little idea of how far we've come in the time frame that Owen's now going to be speaking to you about. So if everyone would like to welcome Owen to the stage. Share his knowledge of Cannabis Buyers Club's history.
Thanks for being here, everybody. And it's my pleasure to present for the first time for the Hempology after attending many Hempologies over the years. My first Hempology something like 7 years ago at Camosun, when it was at Camosun. And yeah, I mean, that was how I first met Ted, first learned about all of this was when we were sitting out on the lawn at Camosun and making a circle. And I was learning about social studies, philosophies, and psychology, a wide range of topics. But a lot of it came with problems without solutions, and many serious problems which could affect me in my life as I grow old. Environmental factors primarily are going to be the scariest topics sometimes, and hemp just jumped out a clear light to help us to find some answers. But it wasn't being talked about. There was Ted outside, he's talking about it. And Ted also has the medical club, and he starts to expand upon what does cannabis do to your body, the endocannabinoid system. Oh, there's over 85 known therapeutic compounds in cannabis. And much of the information is really mind-blowing when you first hear it, and you're like, okay, well, maybe I have to check that out, and I'm not going to be able to necessarily write a report about this stuff until I've done something like that. But I did take the time to write some papers while I was at Camosun, and was the president of the club. We put on a convention, the 6th Cannabis Convention, and now it's the 13th, I think coming up to the 14th. Mm-hmm. And well, success, I showed Ted my interest in being involved with medical cannabis, and he let me know that if there was a space that opened, that there would be, he would ask me about it. But there was one baker, Colby, who Ryan had mentioned, and he took care of just about everything that all the club's needs at the time. So after my time at Camosun, I left the city and went to, I took to the road with my backpack and went to Shambhala, the big festival in the Kootenays, and then from there I took whatever wind took me somewhere, and I started woofing, so working on organic farms, and I went to north of Vancouver to the Sunshine Coast and started learning a bit about gardening, got a job landscaping and stuff like that. Nice to be outdoors and in the field as it is. I do appreciate that kind of work, but then after a few years it wears on you, and I decided I'd come back to Victoria for a visit in the summer of 2008, and I just popped by the club to say hello, and when I got in there I was met by a group hug and people asking if I would be their baker. I could barely refuse. During my time when I was on the Sunshine Coast, my sister had become ill, very seriously ill with skin cancer, and I had come back periodically to visit and be with the family during that time. My family was very conservative in their views of cannabis, very cautious about where we were going to take my sister to give her treatment, and so we went through the doctors every step of the way. They led the treatment for her, a gauntlet of medications and chemotherapy, surgeries that left her with a scar, a gaping scar with a crater about this large in her face, and all kinds of pain, and with the anti-inflammatory medications that she was given and the pain medications, the side effects were devastating to my family. While she's being treated, it was very difficult for her to eat or to sleep, and with those two basic functions taken away, your energy level, generally it becomes very hard to communicate in the way you would like to with your family. And for us, eating out as a family was a very important thing, and through my knowledge of hempology, I brought it up to my family many times. Cannabis can help through the symptoms of chemotherapy. So for knowledge, it's something that was fairly common knowledge at the time. And she did smoke cannabis. She became a member of the Cannabis Buyers Club of Canada, is what it's named at the time. And my mom went with her and did that process together, and it was remarkable. My mother was the witness, and her perspective on the medical properties of cannabis has changed quite dramatically through that eyewitness account. She was able to instantly go and eat the submarine sandwich on the way after having the doobie, where she wasn't able to hold down food at all previous to that. So a very clear difference. And then of course the energy levels come up, feeling better, and just great to see the person smile. Yeah, so she unfortunately passed away only a year after being diagnosed with melanoma, skin cancer, which is a really dangerous form of skin cancer that's on the rise these days. It's said to be related to the increasing holes in the atmosphere, so that the UV radiation has had an effect on our skin. Like in Australia, they have a very high rate of melanoma cancer. And from my research, I found out that it is something which can be treated with cannabis oil. And it wasn't until after she'd passed, sometime after, that I learned about Rick Simpson and using cannabis oil in the concentrated form, specifically on the melanoma cancers on the skin. And that I've seen some slideshows where they have the person's cancer pretty much just emerge from the skin like a big open boil and then disappear. It's pretty just gross, but it's much better than the other consequences, which are dying. And I would have loved to have had access to that knowledge, or even access to the medicine if somebody else had that kind of knowledge. But it's fairly modern revelation. It's fairly new that we've had the Rick Simpson tour cross country and spreading that kind of knowledge around the world. And it was I get email updates from Cannabis Science Incorporated in the United States, and they recently sent me one that says the very thing, that this Spain study confirms concentrated cannabis oil cures cancer without the side effects. And like, this is pretty dramatic things to say, and it would have certainly been a big benefit to our situation. So when I was asked to become a member of the club, it was kind of I was kind of compelled by my own experiences to help those who also hadn't been educated, also don't have access to medicines like cannabis for one, but then the oils, because I was aware of the difficulties people face with the government program as well, not having access to simple edible products or that you could put on your skin for that specific reason. So having been asked, it was a great honor to join Ted and the gang in 2008. Became the head baker and continued my graphic design stuff, making posters, updating the websites. Basically, I've done over 200 graphic design projects in the last few years for Hempology, the Cannabis Digest newspaper as well, and continue that. And it's a great joy to continue spreading this information as it's picking up a pace and the crowd is getting larger. So as good as it was, enjoying myself baking, I was helping the club to consolidate the recipe book at that time and to print it out into PDF, put it into PDF form with images and then a clear layout that could be put on the internet. In and around that time, December 2009, while I was baking at the small makeshift bakery we had at the View Street Apartments, I was arrested. The police came to the door, gave it a loud rap, and said who they were, and I quickly turned down the music. It's been mentioned before that I did have the music up loud, and it's the reasoning behind it is simply I'm a DJ, and I like to listen to music with punctuated kicks and snares. So those things just glide right through the paper walls of these apartment buildings. And unfortunately, without a warning from the person, I was confronted by the police at the door. They asked if it was my place of residence, which it wasn't. So I told them the truth, just as I intend on telling continuously. And they said that I have to let them in. And I didn't think about it till afterwards, but by saying you have to let me in kind of has two meanings. Like, you have to let me in, as in, like I have an obligation to let you in, but then you have to let me in as in I'd have to open the door and allow you to come in. I still don't really understand many of the details of it. But they came in, and immediately the smell was apparent to them. It seemed previously not so apparent, but when they came in, they saw cookies on boxes. They saw Ryanol, which is named after our friend Ryan. It's grapeseed oil, cannabis infused in little gel caps. So put in halfway through, put in the oil in the gel caps, and there's a batch of lozenges in the fridge. There's a jar of butter on the stove, and it's still melting. It was a very cold day, so I had the windows a bit more closed than usual, which is a bit more smell in the room. And so they were very curious about what it was, and I was clear with them from the beginning. This is a bakery for the Cannabis Buyers Club of Canada. Do you know Ted Smith? And fortunately, the police officers did know him, and they'd had experiences with him before, and the club, and so they were very polite the whole time, reading me my rights numerous times. And what they told me was the rock star treatment. I didn't get handcuffed, and they were just very polite throughout the process. After the charges, after I'd had 8 hours in the cell, waiting for the government, which is Health Canada, to let the police officers know that I didn't have a MMAR license, a government license to actually make this stuff, one that wouldn't have existed anyway. Took 8 hours for them to get that conclusive stuff, so they get the warrant and go. And it wasn't until later on in the night, close to midnight, as it was about 2 in the afternoon, that I was arrested. It was close to midnight that they got in, and it was about the same time they let me go. It was about 11:30 at night, and I went back to the club where Ted was there, and he was waiting, and a couple of the other people who were working at the club at the time, Kristen, she was there, and we had a little bit of just kind of a downtime. It was quite an intense experience. Something which, for somebody who believes in something strongly, it's almost recommended to be able to represent that in the face of what is apparently injustice, as the medical cannabis laws at the end of the story get changed by the result of our court case. But so great support from the staff. People, very just physically supportive and emotionally in that way, because I had never been charged with anything before. I don't have any criminal record, so it's just about making a transformation in my life to take this on, like knowing that if it's going to go the long haul, that it's going to be a number of years, and it's coming up to 3 years. So it's been a change in my life, and it's been something that I've responded to over time, using the means that the Cannabis Buyers Club offered to me and the Hempology Society offered to me, so that I can enrich myself through this process, instead of it being a burden, as it could well have been. So I started writing for the Cannabis Digest, and running through just about everything that I could think of that was an important element of the medical cannabis that we sell at the Victoria Cannabis Buyers Club. And the Victoria Cannabis Buyers Club is just the new name for the Cannabis Buyers Club in Canada. So I started writing for the Digest, looking into product testing with Dr. Hornby, who's been here to speak before. And through his very expensive gas chromatograph, we have been able to test some of our edible products so that we can give the staff and the members some idea of what dosage range they're in. So we were able to test these three of our products: the Ryanol, which is previously mentioned, the cookies, and what is our can oil, which is the cannabis buds in olive oil. And we did it in relation to a process called decarboxylation, which I always pronounce wrong. The decarboxylation process transforms cannabis from an inactive state to one which activates your receptor sites and gives you many of the known experiences that cannabis can give. The first tests were done with a low heat, then the heat was gradually increased. The third test with a heat close to 300 degrees for about 30 minutes gave us the optimal, or at least the highest of the 3 tests that we had done, so that we could find out that there is approximately 2.75 milliliters of THC or something there. We did the numbers, and it gave us a really rough estimate of some of our basic edible products. And because we have no consistent way to test it, we can't keep that up. We can't put a label on it saying this is what you've got, but we can give you a general idea until we get that kind of facility up and running. And it is something which was being worked on diligently. So having the products tested is an important part of our medical cannabis service, and certainly something that a lot of people are concerned about when they start to take cannabis is how much they're taking. Edible cannabis can give people an uncomfortable experience the first time that they take it. So it's important to have a dose range. While it's uncomfortable, it's not necessarily unhealthy or serious or long-term. Anyway. So, yeah. Writing for the Cannabis Digest, looking into products, how do we test the products, how do we develop the products, and the development of them comes through feedback, basically, at the club over the many years that we've been there. I mean, the club has been around for since '96, so it's a long time, and there certainly weren't a lot of previous examples to go on for organizations like this to grow. So through the feedback with all the members, all the different needs of all the members, we've grown to have over 30 edible and topical products. Different ones which are sugar-free, which are vegan, which have a specific herb which will target it for a specific condition. Those have all come through the good work that has been done there. Gail has been a pioneer of all that. She's given this particular lecture a couple of times in years past. And she's our personal health consultant. She'll give people more time to talk about their health and the products. So that is a really important part of the medical club, is that there is a community there, and it gives it the opportunity to grow, so the opportunity to add benefits or to add value to the simple medicine that we're starting off with. I mentioned Rick Simpson oil as being really good for being used by people for some very serious conditions. But at the Victoria Cannabis Buyers Club, we can't make concentrated oils which involve the release of fumes which can be flammable. This is dangerous. We have an unwritten agreement with the health authority that we won't do that until we have a commercial or a proper facility with the ventilations that can take care of that kind of thing safely. So unfortunately we don't have that, but what we do have is more like diluted products, or where we have a batch of olive oil and we cook the leaf material into it, or stalk material into it, or bud material, and we use those different materials for different purposes, coming into the commonly known range of cannabis, sativa and indica, which is basically like daytime and nighttime formulas. for people to eat their cannabis and not have unwanted effects. Because with the range of effects and the range of the patients that are there is something for everybody, but we'd like to be able to narrow the focus for individuals to get that relief they need without too many effects they're not asking for. So it's really important for us to promote the edible and topical options for cannabis, as there is an existing culture of cannabis as a smoked medicine or as a recreation, smoked, and it has inherent harms. And when somebody's doing something for their own enjoyment, then they could take the necessary risks. But if somebody is asking for a medicine, then you don't necessarily want to make them smoke it. You've got options, simply made options to eat it or to put it onto your skin. And so using our bulk orders, and because we get our leaf donated, we price all of those alternative options as low as we can, so that the members will be encouraged to pick up other alternatives and break potentially the pattern that they may have of trying to medicate with smoking cannabis. There's general differences there which need to be addressed if you're looking for it medically. Is if you have an acute pain that comes on quickly, that's a condition which can come on quickly, that's where inhaling cannabis is really helpful. Wherein if you have chronic condition, inhaling cannabis isn't as helpful as eating it, because it lasts much longer. Eating it lasts much longer. So many folks at the club found that a combination of eating some cannabis, smoking some, and putting some on their skin has reduced the need that previously they used to smoke, and it's helped to relieve their conditions. They spend less, because purchasing the herb is the most expensive way to go. But if you can use the leaf and the stalk, you bring the price down and you make it more available to people, and to people who really need it specifically. The topical products are very helpful for those who wouldn't like to experience many of the mental or physical effects, because it doesn't pass through your skin so easily. You can localize the relief that you have from topical cannabis to wherever you put it. So if it's arthritis, a lot of people will just use it on their joints, and then that way they don't need to smoke or eat any cannabis. They don't necessarily get high at all, but they can extract the medicinal properties for their own personal use that way. The court case is all about this. It's all about the edible products and the topical products. The government is just loath to accept that their precious definition of dried cannabis is arbitrary. It's absolutely unscientific, and it's really not helping people. Restricting people to smoking cannabis, just like I had explained. Just previously, like I explained, it's not the best thing for everybody. I mean, it should be pretty obvious, but they seem to filibuster the process, just slow the process down of improving their program, improving it in tiny little ways. What seems like to me a small way, to allow a person to be able to make their own tea or cookies. It just seems like anticlimactic after all the efforts that we would go to, and it results in people being allowed cookies. But it's very important. It's very important that the government realize that it's not the inert plant matter which people should be purchasing, but they should be able to get the medicinal compounds in the resins themselves. So When I was charged, I wasn't charged with cannabis resin. I was charged with cannabis THC, which is found in the resin. And it just kind of complicates things a little bit, but they have a list there, a special list for cannabis, Schedule 2 of the CDSA, and they've got resin, THC, CBD. It's basically like all the compounds, the CBN, THC, and CBD. You can't necessarily extract them from the rest of it unless you're like a laboratory. You got some kind of crazy laboratory. Cannabis has got a huge range of cannabinoids, like I mentioned at the very beginning. Like, was one of the first things that blows your mind about this stuff is it has so much to offer, such a huge range to offer. So THC, and they got my name wrong on the original forms. They had somebody else's criminal record on it. It was like they weren't spending much time, really, not focusing too much time on my file. So I sent it back, this is wrong. We thought they were going to drop the charges. We had a press conference. We told the media, yep, looks like they're going to drop it, and they didn't. And we were all very surprised. We were sure that it was going to be over soon, and that they would realize their mistakes, potentially. We originally had Andrew Ullman as our lawyer, but it's such a big case, such a broad scope, that he agreed that we should bring Kirk Tussaw on board, who is a very outspoken, prominent cannabis lawyer. He's been in the union, business behind getting high, and interviewed in that, and the guy is really on point for the whole cannabis law as it's transforming. A very important character in the story, Captain Kirk, and he basically helped us to sculpt our arguments, the rights that were being violated. I mean, Ted as well, the two of them together were quite a duo, and I would sit there and take it in as the two of them shared their ideas, and it was fascinating. I learned so much. The whole process has been a real learning process for me. As it's transformed my whole life in that way. So, Captain Kirk, our constitutional challenge is a voir dire, so it's a trial within a trial, which has the peculiar element of it that we become the prosecution and the government is on the defense. I didn't know about that, but the prosecutor, or say the defendant, the government representative in court, he brought that up at a certain point to defend himself. So we making the plans for it. It's hard to do because in this field you never know if one of your witnesses is going to die, because a lot of people are only still here because we're helping with the cannabis. Like, they have got to the end of the medical rope, and cannabis is the only thing that's keeping their functions regular, keeping them going. And there are a lot of people in very serious conditions, very serious situations, so it is difficult. So eventually, though, we had 4 people ready to testify. Gail, a member of the club, and the staff that I already talked about a little bit. She had just gone through breast cancer, so we were all really concerned about her and whether she was going to make it. And she used a lot of cannabis during that time as well, and we're all really over the moon that she made it through and continues to offer her wonderful self to the world. As well as Gail, there was Sandra, who was in a wheelchair. There's Gina Herman and Ruth. All four of them were very compelling in the courtroom, just unraveling their stories, what their conditions are, what treatments they'd used, and how they came across cannabis and how it had helped them. And it was very powerful. Being in the courtroom during their testimonies, specifically Sandra's testimony, because she also had melanoma. I guess that just strikes a chord for me. But I just crumpled and into tears. And this stuff is really real. And you know, the work that we're doing to bring the medicine to these people is necessary. And it's so apparent when you meet somebody who has benefited from that in that way. And through my personal experience, like compelling personal experience, I find myself in this position. But I also think that there are people out there who, well, with the increase of the particular kind of cancer that I was faced, my family was faced with, that this kind of thing is going to happen more and more, and there's going to be more and more people in these situations, and they're going to need help. And so I'm glad to be involved, and I appreciate all of you and where you've come into this, as I had no idea when I joined Hempology and I was the president 7 years ago that in 2012 I would change the medical cannabis laws. I would help to strike down this definition of dried cannabis and make it clear to those in charge that the medicine is in the resins that appears all over the outside of the plant, grows and is produced externally to the actual fibrous cellulose and the rest of the stuff that the plant uses to grow tall, things like that. Yeah, so yeah, this court case has been pretty intense and involved. It was 20 days, so that's 4 weeks in court, and with the patient witnesses giving their anecdotal evidence, with Ted getting up there for a day, explaining the situation at the club and his knowledge of me and that I worked there and things like that, being cross-examined by the prosecutor. Then we had scientists come up, and this is where the battle really was. It was a wizard battle between the California scientist that we brought, Dr. Pate, who was long white beard, and he has extensive experience with cannabis in the laboratory. He helped GW Pharmaceuticals develop their product Sativex, as well as being on the International Cannabinoids Association board and all kinds of things. Very well respected in this medical science cannabis community. He came up and he laid it down from a botanical perspective that cannabis resin is produced externally to the plant, and that restricting people to dried cannabis is arbitrary in that the dried elements of the cannabis, that is not the resinous stuff with the good medicine inside, is inert, and it even can be full of what we don't want, like pesticides, like maybe fertilizers or heavy metals. Those kinds of things get held more in the plant's lower leaves, and they don't get transported into the ends, those little bulbous ends of the trichomes that form on the plant's surface. His details were beautiful. On the stalk of those mushroom-like jelly things all over the cannabis that you can see with a microscope, the stalk that transports elements up for the production of cannabinoids, but there are no cannabinoids until it reaches this one point at the base of the head. That's a rosette of cells that transform the materials into cannabinoids that are then stored within the bulbous end of the trichome. So that important fact really just made it clear. The judge ended up including much of his testimony, much of Dr. Pay's testimony in the final decision. Dr. Pay was great, and then they had Dr. Abramovich come from the government, sent Health Canada's one of their chief scientists for the medical marijuana program, Dr. Abramovich, and he's written an extensive review of the literature of medical cannabis science that includes anecdotal studies, laboratory stuff, and to give practitioners, medical practitioners, a guide to the program and to the medicine. Unfortunately, and he was very clear to pointing that out, there are no clinical trials that have been undergone for cannabis resin, cannabis eaten, or cannabis for your skin. There's just a lot of anecdotal reports and laboratory science. And unfortunately for him, he contradicted himself really poorly in his affidavit, and lost a lot of credibility for taking the conclusions from his affidavit directly from something that his boss at Health Canada had written, which was like seemed pretty shameful to be concealing that kind of thing. If somebody wrote something, you should say like, hey, that was my boss, his position, and it's, you know, it's somehow in the medical marijuana regulations' interest to keep cannabis resin from becoming legal, and he was fighting it tooth and nail. He would tell us that, he would tell the judge that cannabis for the skin, on one hand, it can make it can make you high, give you high effects. There's some evidence to say that's giving you high effects. On the other hand, it doesn't give you any of the medical effects, and the contradictions were really stark. And fortunately, stark enough for the judge to see through quite clearly in the end. So, yeah, there are many points that the government would bring up about the importance of testing of the cannabis products, the existence of synthetic cannabis products as being one of their defenses, as there is a THC pills, and like I mentioned, Sativex can be prescribed, but it's been a great shortfall over the last few decades to say, from doctors to say Marinol is the option, when it's become clear that there's more than just THC at play. And THC, as the most common medicinal property in cannabis, has also some of what some people enjoy and what some people don't enjoy about mental effects for cannabis. And so when you're having just THC in a pill, you know, there's nothing else, you're just gonna get what THC has to offer. With whole plant medicines, you get other cannabinoids would help to ameliorate some of those effects. For instance, CBD is a cannabinoid which is being found to help to alleviate some of the unwanted effects. And so the whole plant medicines that we've been offering at the Victoria Cannabis Buyers Club have and will continue to be working better than the pharmaceutical synthetics. I could skip over many points in the court case because it's just extensive. But the thing about dried cannabis and the importance of dried cannabis, and then also the problems with the mental effects. my most recent article for the Cannabis Digest, I pointed out how raw cannabis in its acid form is inactive and doesn't bind with the receptors in the same way. It doesn't give people the psychoactive effects. And so raw cannabis, when it's juiced at a certain stage in its development, can give you higher doses of CBD. While the government, must be unaware of that. If they do happen to learn that, then it should be another reason they can clearly drop the definition of dried cannabis as being so important. Because by drying the cannabis, you're allowing those cannabinoids to transform into active states that's going to give the person the unwanted effects that they often complain, the government often argues against. So that case we won. The government, the judge found unconstitutional to restrict people, but it gave the government a full year. So next April, the end of next April, that will be the end of the year, and the government will have to have a response in widening their program to fit the resins of cannabis, to be more specific with what is the medicine that they're offering. A question?
Yeah, we've only got a couple of minutes left. I figured I'd try and get one in. So that was just the first part of the court case, the voir dire. Now you have a second part of the court case coming up? That's right.
In February 4th, there's a jury trial. And so we're going to argue that it is necessary, what I was doing. We're going to bring more members of the club to testify. And that's going to last a number of weeks as well. So we're going to get all nice and prepared for that. And hopefully it goes as well as the other one. A jury of my peers to see that the work I'm doing or did do during that time was necessary to help those people to be in a place of have their necessary rights fulfilled for the medicine that they need to help them live their lives in a reasonable manner. Hopefully they'll see that.
So the voir dire was just sort of like a break in the trial to sort of like get a clarification.
It was like a first strike, like a pre-strike from us, where we can attack the law that they're challenging me with, and we can say that law that you're using, that law is wrong, and that was found to be wrong. However, it was it's interesting. The judge seemed to say at the end of his decision that although you were going to win here, we'll bring you back because we think it's worth it. We think it's going to be worth it for a bunch of people, for a jury to see and hear all this stuff, and for them to make up their mind, make a decision. And so that's what we'll be doing. Make that happen.
Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, so that's transformed the club dramatically. The Victoria Cannabis Buyers Club had to, in response to that, start to get their act together in terms of taxes. There's a whole lot of really detailed, I would say clerical work, like actual accounting, all the new computer system that tracks and does the taxes on all of our products, because we're paying HST on everything. It's transformed the club since this decision, and it just continues to become more of an improved service for all those people who are going to seek it. Some 2 million people estimated that could be using medical cannabis, and we at the club are just over 3,000 or something. There's a lot of room for this area, this industry to grow, and I'm really thankful for my part in it. And I thank everybody for coming. I think we're at the end of.
Got time for a couple more questions.
Yeah, we're at the end of the talk, so open it up for questions. Yes, sir.
So what's expected to be the main argument of this second half of the court case from the prosecutor's side? I mean, we know what this side of the argument is, but like, what do you feel
what will the prosecutor try to argue? Probably a lot of the same stuff. I mean, if it's in front of the public, then they could potentially try to scare them bringing up things.
Like a fear-mongering tactic.
Yeah, I'm not really sure. They seem to have a bag of tricks, for sure. In my case, there was 2 lawyers, actually, for the most part, but I think after they realized they were going to lose, they dropped one of the lawyers. So, what will the government argue? Should be interesting. Come on down, check it out. It's free. It's a show. You can't like yell and stuff, but it's very interesting, and you can learn a lot. So I encourage you to come on down, check it out, and then tell all your friends about it. You know, between now and the jury trial, I expect you all to go out there and tell all your peers how wonderful cannabis is medically, so that the general population will understand and we'll get a good jury.
Well, let's hear it for Owen, everyone. All right, Mr. Owen Smith of the Victoria Cannabis Buyers Club. So it's winter break now. We won't be back until the 9th of January, and Ted will be returning then to give a lecture on the history of industrial hemp. So I hope to see you all here then, and enjoy your break.